keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
Welcome into Coffee Break, everybody. Happy Wednesday to you. Another beautiful hump day in the Mile High City. And before I bring in my regular Wednesday guest, Jake Shapiro, I want to take a small moment to shed some light on a really wonderful cause that we have going on here in the Denver area. It is KYGO's Country Cares for St. Jude Kids Radiothon. Our sister station, KYGO, does a wonderful job doing amazing work in partnership with St. Jude to help raise money and save lives. And you too can become a partner in hope for just $19 a month. You can see on the screen there's a toll-free number to call, or you can text KYGO to 626262. I am proudly wearing my This Shirt Saves Lives St. Jude t-shirt because I have become a partner in hope as of this year, and I hope that all of you can as well, because we love them. We love St. Jude. We love our sister station KYGO and the wonderful work that they do to help some of the sickest kids around the country in their biggest time of need. All right. Jake Shapiro is with me. Jake, welcome in. Appreciate having you like I do every Wednesday. And I got a bunch that I want to get into with you today. So I want to kind of go rapid fire through some of this stuff. The first thing I want to go off the top is you had back-to-back comebacks with the Avs and the Nuggets last night. And I feel like they looked and felt very different. And unfortunately, with the Avalanche, we saw the return of Alexander Forgiev. He gave up 4 goals on, I believe it was like first 11 shots of the game, and was pulled. And we got the first taste of newly acquired goaltender Scott Wedgewood, who had 22 saves on 22 shots and helped the Avs complete a 5-4 comeback last night. I have said on this show and on social media and other places, I think that as bad as it is with Alexander Georgiev at times, the only way that the Avs, if the Avs are going to win another cup, it's going to be on the back of Alexander Georgiev because they don't have any better option. And at this point, I think I'm ready to rescind and amend that. I don't think that Jared Bednar can continue to roll Alexander Georgiev out there night after night as a starting goaltender and yield the results that we're yielding. What say you?
Yeah, Avs aren't winning anything with Alexander Georgiev. You can move on past that. But what I will
agree.
say is it's really nice that Scott Wedgewood provided something for the team, at least short-term spark, because last night seemed like the type of game that could define a season, could really unravel. And, you know, we just had that game a couple weeks ago with the double stick breaking game, and it felt like that a little bit again last night. And if you start having those consistently, you end up being a pretty bad hockey team. So it says a lot, I think, about the Avs and the core guys that they were able to rally back last night and not let a 4-0 deficit early on really impact them. And then they come away with 2 points of all things. I mean, it would have been one thing to just get into overtime at that point. So, yeah, really impressive from the Avs in terms of a mentality standpoint. But, yeah, as the Avs make a trade for a goalie within the last week, they still very obviously need a goalie.
Yeah, no, it's and I had said, when I had said that the Avs, if they are going to win anything, it'll be on the back of Alexander Georgiev. It had nothing to do with Georgie. It was just that he's the best option of the bad options that you had. Justus Annunen was kind of spotty and streaky at best, but even when Justus started to catch on a little bit, when Bednar kind of first peeled back Georgie's time a little bit, I thought, hey, I think that there's a winnable formula that you can build around Justus Annunen, that he's much less prone to give you these 4-goal explosions, 4 goals on 8, 10, 12 shots, whatever it is that we've seen from Georgie, that just turns the entire game upside down for a team that needs, the only thing they need is some semi-reliable consistency between the pipes, and they just can't get it. And so I thought that you could maybe figure it out, and you just needed Georgie to just find a way to beat average. And I just don't think he's got it in him. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the lights being too bright. I don't know I think some of it, because it does seem to kind of come in waves. I think there might be a mental component to this as well, where you just get inside your own head and things start to snowball. But Scott Wedgewood is a career backup goaltender, and I don't expect him to be anything more for the Avs. But at this point, if your aspirations and the contracts that you've put out there and the moves that you've made thus far, if you're the Avalanche organization, are keeping the expectation that we need to return to the Stanley Cup and bring home another championship with these core players, You cannot, in good conscience, keep trotting Georgie out there. Even if Scott Wedgewood does the exact same, I think you need to roll with it going forward.
Yeah, and by the way, Mikko Rantanen is going to ask for the most money in the history of hockey, according to some people that are talking about.
I saw that.
So good luck getting a goalie in here somehow as well.
Yeah, well, so here's my thought, and I was thinking about this earlier today too, having some conversations with some people here in the office. I think at this point, not only do I think you need to roll with Wedgewood over Georgie in the short term, immediate term, I am starting to really wrap my head around the concept of you need to deal Mikko Rantanen before the deadline and try to bring in a top flight goaltender, be it Igor Shesterkin, or I'm certainly a handful of names that you could draw in there. I don't think you're going to be able to pay Mikko what he is going to command, and certainly not what he wants to be paid. And I think that money, even if you found a way to make it work, is better spent shoring up a goaltender to try to win another cup, because they were able to do it with Darcy Kemper and Frankie, who kind of came in a little bit in the postseason. And that is probably the worst goaltending tandem to win a Stanley Cup by save percentage in NHL history. You struck lightning there. That no pun intended, because you beat the Lightning. You struck lightning and struck gold once there. You're not going to strike it again this way. You need to try to win it a different way. And I think if they had reliable goaltending, or at least consistent goaltending, they have the offensive firepower even without Mikko, assuming Val Nichushkin comes back, which we all have to assume is going to happen. And you have to assume that he's going to be able to play, and we're not going to have any more incidents. And then if and when we ever get Gabe Landeskog back, it was nice to have Arturi Lehkonen. I think you can do it, but you can't do it with the two goaltenders you have right now.
No, the Avs are the admiration in recent NHL history, and really all of NHL history, in terms of winning a Stanley Cup without having a great goaltender, or maybe even an elite goaltender. I'm interested, as we're talking right now, and I don't mean to drive people away from this show, but a lot of Avs are about to be named to the Four Nations Cup, the midseason tournament that the NHL is running. So I'm curious which Avs are going to participate. I know Lehkonen and Mikko just got announced for Finland. So that's going to be something that's coming up on denversports.com, or Will Peterson's on it right now, which is why I'm talking hockey instead of Will right here. But no doubt, Richie, as a huge hockey fan myself, you look back at recent NHL history and you say, where are the teams that have won cups without elite goalies and have that recipe? And, not only do teams have elite goalies that win cups, they have great backups too. Almost every single team that goes through the 25-game grueling postseason that it takes to win a Stanley Cup needs to turn to their backup goalie for multiple periods, multiple games at times. I remember the Blackhawks, a couple years back, like the Avalanche in the Western Conference Final. They had to turn back to Corey Crawford got hurt the same way, the Avs had their goalie hurt, Darcy Kemper, a couple of years ago. The Boston Bruins, the last couple of years, they've had that tandem that they finally split up. So this is not Scott Wedgewood could be that second guy, but they still need that first guy. Yeah. And Gorgie, I don't even trust necessarily to be the second guy right now, but New York told you everything you needed to know with what they thought of Alexander Georgiev. They thought, okay, he's a guy that we can run out there every 1 out of 5 nights, and he's good enough to give us a win in the NHL. But there's a reason why we're not going to split reps even with Igor Shesterkin, who I know is one of the best goalies in the league. But if you were that good, you are going to find a way into that lineup.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think that we'll have to wait and see how the dice fall. But we have in Colorado 2 of the best players in their individual sports in Nathan MacKinnon, Nikola Jokic, and I'll even put Cale Makar as a secondary one there for the Avalanche. And you cannot understate the urgency that is needed to keep a team, a competitive team, and a championship contending team around those star players to maximize their windows and their primes while you have them. And that brings us to the other team that plays at Ball Arena, which is the Denver Nuggets. They had a sneaky comeback win over the Warriors, albeit with a little bit of late game drama and controversy. The Warriors were without their defensive stalwart Draymond Green and took a lead in the fourth quarter, only to watch it slip away at the end. With a little help, thanks to the phantom timeout from Christian Braun. I don't know how you saw it, Jake. I don't think Christian Braun was trying to call a timeout that they didn't have. That definitely didn't factor into it. Everything was totally above board there, right?
Looked like to me that Christian Brown tried to call a timeout.
He absolutely did. He absolutely did. Steve Kerr, as he's want to do at times, wasted no time going to the bully pulpit and justifiably so complaining about it. Because I can promise you, if the roles were reversed, I would be sitting here in this chair right now talking to you, and Nuggets Nation across the state would be shouting the same cries that we heard from Steve Kerr. But
the reality is that barely changes the game. It's a 4-point game. They get a free throw and they get the ball back. So they have a free throw with the best free throw shooter of all time, Steph Curry, and a 3-point shot with the best 3-point shooter of all time, in Steph Curry. And by the way, those percentages on those shots are just 90% and 37%. So it's not like that was a guarantee that they were going to get that game to overtime.
It was a guarantee to have a chance to tie the game, but that's it at most.
Correct. And then you're still in overtime against the team who just went on a 13-2 run or 14-2 run to tie the game. So I don't think that really changed the outcome. I do think the Draymond Green thing changed significantly the outcome last night and him missing that game. What I will tell you is I talked all day yesterday in the Mile High Hoops podcast about how the Golden State Warriors are one of the worst matchups for the Denver Nuggets now, after years of them being one of the best matchups simply because of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They never lost to the Warriors with KCP in the lineup. And now without KCP, you saw last night, especially in the first half, Christian Brown can't get around a screen. It's no secret. The NBA has figured that out. They're picking on Jamal Murray on defense. They're making guys run around crazy and screen navigation and trying to just keep up.
They're so fluid with the ball.
Yes, and that excessive motion is just not what the Nuggets are built to cover. And, look at the Nuggets' losses this season. It's Kyrie Irving, a small guard. It's, it's Steph Curry, a small guard that's torching them. Ja Morant, when they run into him, is going to be a struggle. When they played the Clippers, it's James Harden absolutely cooking and Norm Powell absolutely cooking, smaller guards out on the perimeter. And then tomorrow, we're going to see the Denver Nuggets against two of them, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, for the best record in the NBA right now, the Cleveland Cavaliers. So this is a major red flag with the Denver Nuggets, but ultimately, when you have the best player in the world, sometimes you win a basketball game because you have the best player in the world. And he scored 9 points in the final minute and a half of that game to give the Nuggets a chance. And, hits a all-time just blank you shot over Steph Curry with his back turned. That was awesome, Richie. I mean, I was there for us last night. And, Jokic does one thing a game that just makes me giggle and laugh and turn to the person next to me, whoever that person may be. And that was one of those moments. So I still think the Nuggets are deeply flawed. I had this conversation on Mile High Hoops yesterday, but you see the flashes still of why they can still beat anyone in the league and maybe can consistently do so because of they have the player who might be not only the best player in the league right now, but one of the 3 best players in the history of the sport. Yeah,
it was just another classic chunky box score from Nikola Jokic. He was impacting the game in every way. He had 5 steals. He broke 30 points. Came, I think, 4 assists short of a triple-double. And he's in that same category that I just mentioned before of you have the best player in the world. And I agree with you. I think by the time it's said and done, unless he decides to, he ends things on his terms, I think he'll go down as one of the top 5 best players in NBA history. And the placement of which, we'll debate for eons to come. But the Nuggets are a deeply flawed team. And I don't know. You have this core together through the 2022-2027, right? Michael Porter Jr. is going to be the next backup to get paid because he was kind of the first on that back cycle before. 26-27 season. So you got a couple of years here where you got these guys locked in and you're paying the money, you're shelling it out. Christian Brown, although I agree with you, I think the league has figured out certain things about his game that are exploitable weaknesses. I think he has stepped in somewhat admirably thus far, especially on the offensive side in a starting role to replace a guy like KCP. And
Christian has been a better offensive player than KCP has this year so far in the NBA. And that says a lot. And Russell Westbrook, by the way, has been just about as good as you could possibly ask him a contract player to be.
Stunning. Because we had talked about that, about the Russell Westbrook experience, kind of similar to how I feel like people talk about the Jameis Winston experience. It's you're either going to get 100 miles an hour forward or backward, but one way or the other, it's going to be an explosive collision. And it's been all forward thus far he's been amazing.
Not all forward, but
more forward than not. Yeah, more forward than not. Yeah. I think that he's out performed most people's expectations of what we were going to get for the contract that we signed him at, for where he's at in his career, for a guy that was on 5 teams in 5 years prior to coming here, and whose game is largely reliant on athleticism, of which he is continually kind of fading year by year.
Yeah, I do think that one of the reasons why the Denver Nuggets in close games this year, crunch time, they've played, I think, like the 4th or 5th most games in crunch time already. They've got a pretty solid record. I think they're like 7-4 or something like that in crunch time. But 2 of those 4 losses came directly because the other team went on like a 9-0 run because they didn't guard Russell Westbrook. They literally clogged the paint. The Nuggets couldn't score. They couldn't get stops on the other end because they couldn't get back either. Last night, you saw them roll out a lineup, and Russ came in for a defensive possession at the end, but it was not Russ. It was the starters out there. And even at one point, it was the starters minus Mike plus Julian at one point for a while in that comeback that they made in the second half. So when I look at the Denver Nuggets, one of the keys to that comeback was simply that Russell Westbrook was not on the floor, and they were good enough with their guys out there that they didn't need Russ, and they were able to space the floor, and they were able to do things. And the thing that's going to get lost, and Jamal looked horrible at times last night again in his mentality, and everyone's saying about his aggressiveness. Jamal was awesome on defense, like truly awesome, like hustled his butt off, had a key block down the stretch. And by the way, had 8 assists on offense. I know he only shot 4 of 12, but he made some key plays down the stretch. And that's the thing is, I still don't know what you're getting better than Jamal. Like people say, oh, trade him, blah, blah, blah. You can't have this. You have that point about Alexander Gorgiev, and if he's that, this is your best chance of winning the cup.
He's the best of what you have.
Yeah. I think that's more extreme with Jamal because Jamal's proven that the Nuggets can win a title with Jamal being the second best player.
When he's on, when Jamal is on offensively, especially, it is something to behold. Some of his clutch time shooting. He had 2 shots in the Lakers series alone last year. One was a game winner, literally, and one was a de facto game winner on the final possession. When he's on, it's special.
He was the only guy besides Jokic that was good in that game 7 against Minnesota.
He's when he's on, it's special. It's just, I think that the frustration with Jamal by and large has been, why can he not be on like that more? And why can we not rely on that more? But in the same way, we've had conversations about Michael Porter Jr., who's kind of like a crowd the 3-point line, kind of wait for my possession and shoot. And if it's cold, he doesn't give you much. Michael Porter Jr. has found ways more this season, in my opinion, to be impactful beyond the 3-point. He's improved in the mid-range. He's contributing a little bit more in other ways. I think that is something that at least Jamal thus far is still able to hang his hat on at times, is that he can still be impactful on the defensive side with some hustle plays defensively. And if he's distributing the ball to other scorers when his shot is not falling, then at least it becomes a little bit more survivable or a little bit less impactful if he's not on the way that we know he can be.
Yeah, and by the way, the Nuggets don't win that game last night if Aaron Gordon's not playing.
My favorite Nugget of all time.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily because Aaron was awesome in that game. He was fine. It was good to see him in his second game back. He did some really nice things. No hate for Aaron, but you see what's behind Aaron and Nikola, and Zeke's a minus like 15, 17
brutal,
in that game. Peyton was a minus 15 in that game. Their bench is the worst it's ever been. Somehow it continues to get even worse because of the roster management of the Denver Nuggets. And they struck out clearly on Dario Saric. That's already over, and it's not even December. That's not going to work. They cannot play him. Zeke Naji, we shall see. Well, we've seen. We do not like what we've seen.
And then
DJ's a part-time player, and Deron Holmes and Vlatko Čanč are out for the year. The Nuggets have right now on their roster, combined with Jalen Pickett, quite literally at least 7 unplayable guys, or 7 unplayable guys, 6 unplayable plus a part-time player. And the Nuggets are just so shallow because of it. And they need answers. You cannot play Nikola 40 minutes a night with him being plus 25 and you winning by 4. Like, that's not a recipe for sustained success, which is why they lost Sunday night in LA against the Clippers, because their margin for error is so thin. And when you struggle from the free throw line like they did in that game, you cannot overcome it.
Yep. Yeah, no, you're right. And this was a conscious decision by Calvin Booth and the front office that they did not shore up the bench unit, knowing that Christian Brown was going to be moving up to the starting unit. Did they do as much as they could, Jake?
But they did, and they messed up. I mean, they got Russell Westbrook. They changed around the bench. They dumped Reggie Jackson. They moved up in the draft to get De'Ron Holmes, who unfortunately got injured.
The injury. You can't fault them for the injury because that was a freak thing. Right. It happened in the preseason. I think Russell Westbrook
biggest free agent contract on Dario Saric to shore up the bench instead of going and getting a shooting guard to play in the starting lineup. They focused entirely on the bench this offseason.
They just didn't hit. Because it feels like Dario Saric at times has forgotten how to play basketball. And with 1 year on his contract, it wouldn't surprise me if he's playing in overseas 2 years.
He's got a 2-year guarantee.
He's got this year and next year.
Correct.
Right. So
$5 million on the book
it wouldn't surprise me if he after his contract with the Nuggets, he's back in Europe playing overseas again, because he can probably do exactly what he's doing now and have more minutes and not be a weekly DNP like he has been for so many of these games. And I think Russell Westbrook has actually outperformed some of the metrics. So I think they actually get a little bit of a plus for that, but a much bigger minus for Saric. And yeah, this was the philosophy behind Calvin Booth's thing, right? These guys that were these bargain kind of cheaper guys, they've got to contribute and they've got to perform. And it's been spotty thus far.
And here's the thing. I really like some of what I see from Julian at times.
Mm-hmm.
The overall has been a negative,
yeah.
But you see the sparks at times, and you just it's one of those situations where they just need to keep playing Julian, and hopefully he develops by the end of the season where he is a full-time rotation player in the NBA, because you need that body in that shooting in the playoffs. So the Nuggets are just going to have to live with Julian costing them some games here in the interim while he figures it out. Peyton Watson, by the way, has had a disaster start to the season. We're barely talking about it. 1 out of every 4 of his games has been good.
Yeah, and that's a couple big blocks.
You're relying on late first round picks, and that's the best part of your roster in terms of these rotation players. And one of them has hit tremendously in Christian Brown, but Julian and Peyton look like more of the typical late first round picks at this point. And by the way, most of the teams around the league, look at the Milwaukee Bucks. They haven't had a late first round pick hit since 2016, 2017 with Pat Connaughton. That's how it works for most teams around the league. So, the Nuggets are just in a tough spot. And, I heard the TNT broadcast talking about it last night because I was listening in my headphones while I was at the game.
Mm-hmm.
And, talking about how the Nuggets need to shake up their roster. They need to trade, blah, blah, blah. There's not really anything they can do.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing I keep coming back to. They don't have draft picks. They don't have matchable contracts to trade. They don't have a young player that's enticing for teams. Maybe they can trade Peyton Watson for a veteran player, but it's not really much they can do aside from breaking up the core, which it's probably not in their best interest to do. There was some rumor last night about De'Aaron Fox. Now, Matt Moore, who's a friend of 104 Through the Fan, said that De'Aaron Fox might be on the market towards the end of the season. And I had the intrusive thought of, would Jamal Murray for De'Aaron Fox be something that's tenable for either side? Would either side really be interested? Would that improve the Nuggets? And I came back to De'Aaron Fox is too small. That's not what makes the Nuggets successful. So I think the Nuggets are kind of just stuck. They need the couple things, whether it's Julian and Jamal, to go right and just play better. There's not much more they can hope for. And the fact of the matter is you win a lot of games when you have the best player in the world. That's how this sport works. And they have the best player in the world. And until they don't have the best player in the world, they're still a contender. That, it doesn't matter all the rest that's going on. They're still a contender as long as Nikola Jokic is on the floor.
Yeah, and you mentioned Zeke not having matchable contracts, and that just, in my mind, immediately every time goes to Zeke Naji, who I think has 2 or 3 years left on his contract with a player option as well. And it's just
picking that one up.
Yep. How did we end up in this situation? I mean, he seems like a player that at times it would be hard to give away, literally, because of the financial elements.
And under the prior CBA structure, it actually made sense to sign Zeke Naji to that deal because of the contracts match. But now, because of the new second apron, you can't do anything with Zeke. And that not only $8 million, but that roster spot is really just hurting the Nuggets. And I am, Richie, the easiest thing the Nuggets can do, and the best thing they could probably do at some point this season, is cut Jalen Pickett. That did not work out. He's still in the G League, and just simply get another body in here. We saw how good Justin Holiday was in the playoffs last year. He's without a job in pro basketball right now. Cut Jalen Pickett, pick up Justin Holiday. You at least have another body you can throw out there. And I'm not saying Justin Holiday changes the fortunes of everything going on with the Nuggets, but at least he's a guy you can put on the floor for 15 minutes a night and it doesn't all go to hell.
Yeah, no, that's true. I like that. I hadn't considered that before. I did not know that he was out of a job, but you're right. He was a impactful contributor in the postseason last year, somebody that Michael Malone trusted, and you know how tight his bench and his kind of like trust rope gets when it comes to the postseason and how unwilling he is to budge from it. So I'm all for it. They need to, just much like the Avs, you got to do something. You can't just keep putting the status quo out there and expecting to overcome 4-goal deficits in the first period, or Nikola Jokic playing 40, 45 minutes a night to overcome some of their deficiencies when he's not on the court. So they've got to do something. The De'Aaron Fox thing is interesting. Love Matt Moore, Action Network. He's as plugged in as anybody. I hadn't considered that. There's only been a couple of people that I feel like mentally I've wrapped my head around putting Jamal in the chopping block for. The first was Drew Holiday. When he became available, I was like, man, that would be something. I think that would be fun. And I had a brief flirtation with the Donovan Mitchell thing too when he first came up on the block, because I think those were two guys that you could have done it for. But those were, I mean, it's not really even a hot take. Those were two of the biggest blockbuster point guard trades of those, handful of years. So we'll see. I agree with you. They need to do something. And I don't think their options are incredibly vast. Probably more constricted than maybe the Avalanche are in terms of like financial flexibility and things that they can do. But I want it to happen because, like I said, we've got the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic, and you've got one of the best cores in hockey with the Avalanche, and you can't just sit and walk idly by hoping that something happens. The next thing that I wanted to get into briefly here, because I know we're short on time, is the
I gotta take the signing day.
Yep. Oh, signing day. Ooh, okay. Well, maybe we'll get a little update from Jake here in a minute about National Signing Day. He's as plugged into the Buffs as any. I did want to touch on the Broncos a little bit as we head into their bye week. I couldn't, in a lot of ways, even though there's games I feel like they could have won or they should have won, especially early in the season when they started 0-2 with a couple of matchups that I think, especially now, would be looked at much more favorably. I can't think that the Broncos could expect to be in a better position heading into their bye week at 8-5 in the first year of a rebuild with Bo Nix than they are right now. Jake, would you agree with that statement?
My pie in the sky, positive Broncos season, Richie, like best possible outcome for the Broncos season going into it was they find their quarterback, they play around 500, and, Sean Payton looks like he knows how to operate with his quarterback. Richie, forget that. They found their quarterback, and they're a good football team. No one saw this. I mean, some people might have said, oh, I really think Sean Payton can figure this out. Come on. If you really put someone with, some money on it and thought the Broncos were going to be a real deal playoff contender, and, basically we're sitting here December 4th, a month before the playoffs, they're almost locked into a playoff spot. Like that's incredible. No one expected this to be the Broncos season. And, I still think there's more positivity to possibly come. You're seeing the Broncos yesterday cut Josh Reynolds because they have so much hope for these young wide receivers. Who thought they were going to be able to, early on the season, it looked like the Broncos offense didn't have a single playmaker. Now it looks like, okay, there's a couple guys on this team that can really do some things. I still think they probably need a number one running back. But God, I think they could probably get away with the pass catchers that they have, and Bo seems to like it. And Sutton looks like he did like 5 years ago before all the surgeries. He looks awesome. The defense has been fantastic. Vance Joseph, by the way, probably should be back up for head coaching jobs. Like, what are we doing here, Richie? Like, everything has broken right for the Denver Broncos in a way I have not seen for a team in a while.
Exactly. When you look at the parameters that were coming into this offseason, the oil and water mixture of Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, and leading to taking the biggest dead cap hit in NFL history to part ways with that. So you have no cap space. You have a roster, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that is just void of playmakers. And you draft a rookie quarterback who's the 6th quarterback off the board, even though he was taken 12th overall. This literally felt like for the Broncos to achieve what they are right now was sitting at a blackjack table, hitting on 17 and flipping a 4. Everything had to break the right way. Bo Nix has proven a lot of the pre-draft skepticism that was centered around him wrong in the early returns. He was scouted as a second, third round talent. He was a check down merchant. He was somebody at Oregon who was spread out and it was devalued in terms of his experience, being the most experienced quarterback in college football history. And I really do think that a lot of his success is predicated on the match with Sean Payton. I do think that Sean, who is also kind of being vindicated by this because he came in, had all these high expectations, and was kind of out to prove that he still can coach at a high offensive level in the NFL and that he's still got it in a way. And these two are kind of propping each other up to both prove their own points in their own ways. And I can't, I don't want to say house money because I actually treat this the same way that I feel like I've treated the Buffs in that it's a sliding scale. So you're right. Their over under was 5.5. I think I had them winning 6-7 games all season. So clear in the over or hopefully maybe getting to 8, which they're currently at now with 4 to go. And I'll go so far as to say this, Jake. I threw it out there to James Palmer on our Overreaction Tuesday segment yesterday. And I genuinely believe it. I am of the mind the Broncos have 1 loss left on their schedule this season. 1. And I think you can flip a coin between the Bengals and the Chargers. I felt more confident about that before they flexed it into Thursday night and gave themselves an extra short week on the road.
So
and
wait.
Go ahead. I'm ready for this.
December 4th, Richie Carni is guaranteeing the Denver Broncos beat the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yep. Because I'll give it to you both ways. 1, there's a chance, depending on how the cards play out, although it's tighter than it has been in previous years, that they may not have a lot to play for. So you might get a JV squad, which has beaten the Broncos before in years past. You might get a JV squad in week 18. But I'll even go so far as to say this. Even if they haven't locked it up and they're still neck and neck with Buffalo to try to secure that bye week, the Broncos almost went into Arrowhead and beat them on the road. And I think that slipping out of their fingers and Alex Forsythe not dying slow enough to prevent them from stealing that road win and handing the Chiefs their first loss of the year, that still sticks up here. And I think when it comes back around, they'll be at home and they're not going to let it happen twice. Just like I think if we get the picture perfect cinema moment of the Broncos making a wild card playoff game and having to face Russell Wilson and the Steelers in the postseason, they're not getting got again. I think the Broncos have 1 loss left on their schedule. I think they're going to beat Indianapolis after the bye. I think that they're going to beat the Bengals, who, again, could shut that situation down at that point in the year. If there's Joe Burrow, despite having statistically the greatest offensive season on a 4-win team I think I've ever seen in my life, to the point where it's statistically improbable that they would lose this many games with the offensive production that they have. If they decide to shut that down because they've got a lot of things up in the air with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, all of that, you could get a winnable game there. And then I think the Chargers are a good team. That's the one that I think you might lose and you might get swept by them. Although historically speaking, we've split with the Chargers, even when they've been good and we've been not, and we've been good and they've been not. It just kind of comes out in the wash. And I think you'll beat the Chiefs. I do. I think they've got 1 loss left on their schedule. And I'll say it, December 4th, 2024, the year of our Lord. I'll say it right now. That's my thought.
Okay. I like it. I do, and I don't mean this in a way to aggregate me or put it in a bad way. Because let me explain this for a second. But I think Bo Nix is a system quarterback, and I do think that there's this type of quarterback in the league that comes into the league as a system quarterback and gets enough experience to where they grow out of that and become a really good to great player. Mm-hmm. And one of those players is Jared Goff. Another one is Baker Mayfield. So, there's a world in which Bo Nix gets enough reps where things really break positively for him.
Yeah, no, listen, I think that
day.
Oh, you got it. You got it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jake. Hey, we'll see you next week, man. I appreciate you stepping in. All right, Jake Shapiro. The last thing that I want to throw out to you, the listeners here, as we close out is the Colorado Buffaloes. I mentioned it earlier when I was just talking to Jake about how we grade these seasons, right? I said that some people might take the Broncos season sitting at 8-5 heading into the bye week and say, hey, Their over-under before the season was 5.5. You had national outlets and pundits like Craig Carton saying they're only going to win 2 or 3 games this year. They're going to have the number 1 overall pick, and they're going to draft a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, or they're going to draft Travis Hunter or somebody at the top of the draft just after drafting Bo Nix. And so that if they're at 8 wins now heading into their late bye week, it's house money from here on out. And I disagree with that, because I think you have to take information as it comes, and you have to adjust expectations as they come, because you're making those preseason expectations without any context or without any idea of how the dice are going to fall. And now that they've started to fall, I think you need to take that into a rolling evaluation of the team. And so I do think the Broncos need to make the postseason desperately at this point, which as of this morning, I believe they have a 77% chance of doing so. And if they come out of the bye week and they beat Indianapolis and they get to 8 wins, and if they beat the Chargers, or if they end up with 9 or 10 wins by the end of the season and they're in that wild card spot, I think that the expectation might be they need to win a playoff game. And the other side of that being or what, and the or what might be it's a bummer, it's a disappointment. I don't necessarily think that it's strong enough to call anything a failure if that doesn't happen, but I think disappointment is totally in play. And I think the same applies to the Colorado Buffaloes a little bit. I think that they started out hot with 3 straight wins last season, and then things just absolutely came off the rails to a degree that I think a lot of people in hindsight may have seen coming, but in the moment it sure didn't feel that way. The Buffs had everything in front of them this season. They had the runway lights were on to go to the Big 12 title game, even after losing to Kansas State in heartbreaking fashion in the final minutes, giving up a 2-play, 90-yard touchdown drive in the final minute to drop that game that they had largely put themselves in a position to win. And then it happens again against Kansas. And that's the issue. That's the cross that you bear when you are a good team like the Colorado Buffaloes genuinely are, is that you're on upset watch, trap game watch every single week. And it's on you not to trip and fall and beat yourself, because by and large, you are able, from a skill standpoint, to beat the teams that are in front of you. And it didn't happen against Kansas. Devin Neal is still running into the end zone over there at Arrowhead Stadium, and there's just nobody there to guard him. So I don't know if I'm as excited. I don't know if I will to cue the lower third there at the bottom. I don't know if I'll remember the Alamo Bowl. I don't know if a bowl game against BYU. Now I get it. They made a bowl game. And 2 years ago as a 1-win program, we would have been like, praise the Lord. Are you kidding? Well, I'll take a bowl game. I'll take 6 wins and sneak it into the Tax Slayer Bowl or the Tony the Tiger Bowl or whatever it is. But you got to take things as they come. And I think that the first year, finishing with 4 wins, hey, that's a 3-win improvement from the previous year, taking the worst roster in college football, one of the worst programs in college football, overhauling the roster, installing new offenses, a new defense, all the pieces moving. Hey, 4 wins, we'll take that. But next year's got to be big. And it was set to be that. And they stumble against Kansas. They almost got enough help to still make it to the Big 12 title game. Despite that, they just needed Houston to take care of BYU. It didn't happen. And now it looks like they're going to play BYU in the Alamo Bowl. And it's good. They had a better season. They improved. If you're talking about stacking, going from 1 win to 4 wins to 8 or 9 wins, you get a bowl game in there, but you had the college football playoff. It was right there. You could touch it. It was right there, and they blew it. They did. They choked it away. And while I think it's a positive thing, I do think it's okay to be a little disappointed or frustrated with settling for an Alamo Bowl game against BYU, because I think this team was capable of a lot more. And I know they've got Juju Lewis, who is officially signed, and they have the next chapter beyond Shedeur and beyond Travis Hunter. And they're going to be a contending team, it looks like, at least on paper, for a few more years, or we'll see how it shakes out. But you just never know. With college football being as volatile as it is already, and the added pressure of the NIL era that we're in, and the transfer portal, and all the mobility that these teams are now using, which Coach Prime is one of the best suited in the country to take advantage of. But it's just hard you never know when you're going to get there. Just like you can't choose when you suck. And we say that about NFL teams all the time. When you've got a top tier draft pick and you have a quarterback who's maybe good, maybe not, and you're not really sure about it, but you're in position to take one like the Broncos were with Josh Allen, and they chose Bradley Chubb again. You passed on Josh Allen at number 5 if you're the Broncos, and you never know when you're going to be back there. Now, the Broncos have had some top 10 draft picks since then, and, we've seen what they've done with them. But just like you can't choose when you suck, you don't know when you're going to have that opportunity to have the cards fall for the college football playoff to be in your grasp. And they had it this year, and they couldn't capitalize it. So I think I will remember the Alamo Bowl, if that's where they end up based on the projections, as a positive season. But there will be a little bit of a next to it, and that's what's frustrating. So as always, I appreciate all of you hanging out with us here on Coffee Break. Appreciate Jake Shapiro, who's one of the busiest men at the station and on the planet between National Signing Day. He's covering the Buffs as closely as anybody. He's at our Nuggets games, covering things wall to wall there. He's writing for denversports.com. He's hosting the Mile High Hoops podcast. All the great work that he does. I appreciate him carving a little bit of time out here to be with me and to be with all of you. So please give us a follow on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of our socials at denversports.com. So much content going out every single day. Nobody's more locked in than we are. And I can't wait to bring it all to you again tomorrow. So for the rest of you out there, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you then.